Welcome to Fostering Godlike Sexuality at Home. Our goal here is to empower parents to teach their children to see sex in a godlike way.
My name is Brigham Elton. I'm a pornography and sexual addiction counselor who've helped thousands of people overcome even the appeal of pornography. And I'm hoping to get out in front of this and try to help parents to set up their homes to chase godlike sexuality from the beginning.
My name's Andrea, a mother of 4, and I'm learning alongside all you listeners and excited to have these discussions. Thanks for joining us.
For this episode, I really hope you've listened to why our view of sex matters. Because we're going to talk about God's view of sex today and how to obtain a godly perspective of sex. But I think sometimes that motivation comes for why does our view of sex matter at all?
Yeah.
And so I hope that people honestly, even if you have to stop this now and go back one episode and listen, it's worth it. It's a 20-minute episode. You can do it.
That's the first one.
Yeah.
Go.
And it'll be really helpful to go and hit it one more time. Yeah. But today, like I said, our focus is going to be how can we obtain a godlike perspective of sex?
Yep.
We learn loads of things from God, and there are a lot of principles of learning things from God, and honestly, they're pretty similar when it comes to sex.
Yeah.
To me, there are two primary ways we're going to try to learn God's view of sex. And one of them is by individually asking, and the second one is by conversing with others and reading talks and from our leaders and seeking from others what has been written about God's perspective of sex.
Awesome.
Today, I want to lean into asking.
Okay.
Individually asking God a question about sex.
So what's this like for your clients? This is one of the first things you do with them, right?
Yeah, this is our first meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've mentioned God's view of sex to them probably 8 times, and it's just kind of bouncing off. But when we talk about asking God's perspective of sex and we actually sit in this moment, we come to a new level of depth of seeing God as a sexual being. Mm-hmm. Right?
So that's kind of the first thing that clients are grappling with,
Totally.
or partners or support.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to define what we mean when we say God's view of sex.
Okay.
Right? When we're talking about God, we're not just talking, I think people hear God and they think Heavenly Father.
Right.
Which, awesome, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's more than that.
Right. We're talking about Heavenly Mother.
Yeah.
Right? Because God is Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother.
Yeah. It's
also,
the us unit.
God is Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ is a God.
Yeah. There are a lot of gods.
Yeah.
Right? And specifically right now when I'm saying ask God, I'm talking about asking Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, their us unit, about their perception of sex.
Because that's what we are aiming for.
Yeah, exactly. Our goal is to become like God, and they are a unit that I think we can chase.
Yeah. And our spirits are naturally in tune to and inclined towards their perspectives and their views.
Yeah, totally. And so then when we say someone's view of sex, we're not just talking about what they think about sex.
Okay.
We're talking about the way that they choose to sexually behave, the way that they process and direct sexual feeling, the way that they process sexual thoughts. What do they think about, and are they sexual at all? We're talking about all those things. This is quite a big umbrella.
The way that they think, the way that they feel, the way that they act sexually.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then when we say sex, we don't just mean sex, right? There's a lot of things that go into sex.
We don't just mean sexual intercourse moment.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right? We're talking about physical intimacy as a whole. Mm-hmm. Do our gods still use kisses to express affection?
Right.
Is that physical intimacy part of their partnership? Right.
How do they perceive and view their body?
Yeah, especially their genitalia. How does Heavenly Mother think about her body, or how does Heavenly Father think about his body or Heavenly Mother's body? And then I think also their relationship. And how do they know their relationship is ready for intimacy? How do they maintain a partnership relationship? Is there still date night in the heavens? What? And then as we learn about them, right? And this umbrella is pretty big, but as we learn about them and the way that they are intimately and sexually intimately and specifically, I think that our direction becomes clear, right? I think you could read a bajillion sexual health books, and there's a bajillion of them, and there's some really good stuff and some stuff that I just individually don't believe is godly. But I think if your aim is godly, that's what matters.
That is so elevated from just going to what is available scientifically, right?
Totally.
Because we're using data from a fallen world.
Yeah.
And unless we really try to tap into that intuition, that spiritual intuition of who we are designed to become like our heavenly parents, then we are missing that momentum that pulls us away from the aspects of the fallen world that we're trying to fight against.
Totally. Like, I don't want to become like them. Like these, like there's some great sexual educators, really, but like I don't want to be like them. Like my goal is to be like God, and so like that's what I want my aim to be sexually, right?
Yeah.
And so when we get to this like ask portion, right, and so we're sitting there with my clients, and I'm like, okay, we first talk about their relationship with prayer and revelation and those kind of things, right?
Okay.
But we're asking them to individually ask God a question about sex, to engage with the gods individually and just learn about what they're like sexually. And so we ask them to come up with a list of individual questions that they could ask a God about sex. Right? And I'd like to do that today together. It's just like bounce off some question ideas, and so that like someone listening here could get some ideas of a question that they could take to God.
Yeah.
Right? Almost always I like to start with the question like, is sex part of the eternities?
That would be fundamental, right?
Yeah.
If we're going to have questions about sex in the eternities,
because if
we
they're
need to know
not
if it's
being
there.
sexual, it's pretty much over.
Yeah.
You know? But like, are our heavenly parents sexual still? You know? And is that part of having a body? Is there, and then behind that is a lot of questions like, why are they sexual? Like, what's the purpose of sex in the eternities? Is it procreation still? Is it just connection? Is it something else that maybe we don't know about? Right? But like, is sex part of the eternities? And what's the purpose of sexual intimacy in the eternities? Right? That's kind of the question I like to start with. Then I like to turn to them and go like, okay, what questions do you have? But let's come up with some other ones.
So like you might ask a question like, do you enjoy having sexual intimacy with your partner in the eternities? Like, is pleasure an important part of the experience?
Yeah. Is pleasure a godly thing? Yeah. Right? Like, I love that.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think sometimes people wonder like, and I've even had youth ask me like, are orgasms godly? Like, is it godly to have an orgasm, or is that like a part of the? Is that like
a
should I feel
degraded
icky
part
by that?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because I think you'll hear these questions, and you can hear behind them these wonderings of like, am I icky?
Yeah.
For some of these things that I have, you know. Another question that I really like that kids ask pretty consistently is this: like, do you think about sex? Like, do the gods have sexual thoughts? You know, or is that like something you're just past, right? Are they walking around and all of a sudden they think about like, oh, I wonder if this, you know, or does that not even happen as a god? Yeah. And then if it does, how does a god deal with that? Yeah. Like, if a god's even maybe they're there and they see their partner and they're like, oh, I want to do this. Yeah. Like, how does God direct that thought? Is it a push it away? Is it a lean in? Is it imagine? Like, how does a god deal with that moment? Yeah. Cool.
Let's see. What does either partner ever not want to have sex when the other does?
Yeah. Love that question.
That's probably a big one that partners like to
it's a common
consider.
One. Right. And they are very hesitant to ask it. But then as soon as I write it down, they're like, yes. Yeah. And because there's like a lot of questions kind of with this, right? Like, how, if you're not feeling the desire to and you're choosing not to, you know, like, how can you reject your partner in a godly way? Yeah. You know? And then how do you handle rejection? In a godly way?
What does it mean to you? Yeah. When that happens. Like, what does that mean for your relationship?
Totally.
Is it okay? Is it normal?
Yeah. And does it take a minute to process it? Or is it just like, okay, we're good? Yeah. You know, or is there just like this, bummer? You know?
Those are such good questions.
I always really like the question of, it's pretty similar to this one, of just like, how do you deal with differing levels of desire in a partnership? You know, because I think every partnership ever doesn't have the exact same sexual desire, or even like desire for frequency, or like how quickly their motor runs. You know, and like, how do you manage that? You know, is it healthy to have sex when you don't want to, but you're choosing to because you are invested in your partnership? Yeah. Like, is that a godly choice, or is it like, it only should be done when it's wanted? Right. You know, and I think it's important to separate wanted and chosen there. Obviously, like, it's only healthy to do it when it's chosen. Right. Yes. But like, is it only healthy to do it when it's wanted?
Like, spontaneously wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, another one would be like, do you sexually, do you always do the same thing? Like, do things change for your sexual patterns? Like, does your experience vary?
Yeah. Like, is the pace different? Is like the actual behaviors different? Like, yeah, it's a great question. Maybe like who do you talk to about sex? Like, is that something you just talk to your partner about? Do you does Heavenly Mother talk to her girlfriends about
like how
sex?
private is your sexual life?
Yeah, maybe? Totally. Like, and then what's the balance of privacy, right? Like, is it they share everything? Is it like, hey, there's like certain things we don't share, but like principle wise, we want to be a teacher of our children, you know? Like, I wonder where they're at with that.
That's a good question. It's my turn.
Yeah. You have another?
Let's think. Do you talk, like, do they communicate and talk about sex? Like what they...
Are you saying like during, or are you saying like...
Yeah, during or like before or after? Do they evaluate?
Do they have sexual check-ins?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like how frequently are you like having your like, hey, how are you feeling about us? You know? Like I wonder how frequently that's happening. Or do we just like, I don't know, some people, I say that to them here in my office and they go like, well, aren't the gods just perfectly aligned? And I don't know, maybe that's true.
Yeah.
Maybe they just like...
Can communicate perfectly minus the words.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, that's still communication even if you're reading someone's mind, but whatever. Anyway, yeah, maybe.
Like,
who knows?
Read their body, read their body language and their emotions. And
totally. That could totally be how it happens. I'm curious, like, how Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother feel about their bodies. You know? And is it like everyone has this perfected bodies that are all the same? Are they just like proud of where their body is at now? Have they just like gotten to the point where they perfectly accept their body? Maybe it didn't even change at all. Like, I wonder the way that they think about their bodies. Yeah. You know? Yeah. Yeah. And then I think you can also go down the lane of like what sexual behaviors are godly. You know? Like, is anal sex or anal stimulation godly? Is oral sex or oral stimulation godly, right? Like lubrication, contraception, masturbation, self-stimulating, like sending like nudes to each other, like sexting, like role play. Like, are there certain positions that are like not ungodly? Is it ungodly to like learn sexually? You know, like, is it against God's ways to like read a secular learning book about sex?
Like to understand different behaviors that people...
Or just to learn like how to stimulate a partner, right? Like, is that type of sexual learning
appropriate
and godly?
And
or is that like, hey, you need to figure this out on your own, you know? And then is it healthy to even religiously learn about sex? You know, I just think there is like a lot of like sexual behavior questions, you know?
Yeah. And I think that you like help clients kind of get to this space that pulls them into like territory that they're uncomfortable with, right? Like, it's uncomfortable maybe even to think about talking about some of these things with your own partner. And now it's like, oh, and I'm now going to go talk to God about them. Like, it kind of just like helps you reflect on what your current view is. It kind of gives you a mirror into where you're really at right now.
It's cool to watch it happen where there's like so much resistance, right? Like, we start and I ask people their first question and then I'm like, okay, what question could you ask? And there is like so much hesitancy. And sometimes they have one, but there's hesitancy on their first or second turn. And there's usually 2 to 3 people here. And we typically get to 40 questions. But at first there's just this like, how could I even think of God as a sexual being? Like, there's just so much distance there. And then every single time they ask a question or I list a question, that distance starts to close in.
Yeah.
Right? And then at the end, I'm like, the questions are just bouncing off the wall where it's just like, how about this? How about that? And you can see the questions that they actually have about sex.
Yeah.
You know? But like, to aim those questions at a God instead of at a professional or a book or a friend.
Yeah.
Like, what a better place to aim. You know? Like, I think forever, when I was like a missionary, you would read, like, hear about, you think about sex a lot as a missionary. You're a 19-year-old boy, you know? And like, well, back then you're a 19-year-old boy. I guess you still are. Just that's your second year. But like, you'd be thinking about sex and then you would hear, I hear these things like, you know, like, once you're in the bedroom and you're married, you can do whatever you want. Like, I would hear that consistently. Like, once you get married, you can do whatever you want, you know? And it was just like so boundless.
Yeah.
After you got married. And it was so not only boundless, but godless.
Yeah.
It wasn't like involve God and then decide together what behaviors you think are godly. It was just like, do whatever you feel comfortable doing, you know? And I think that like is a little sad.
Yeah.
You know, to just like, okay, I made it past this like bar of sexuality. I made it to married and now I'm good. Like lustful sex can still totally exist in a marriage.
Absolutely.
You know, and like to lose that aim of God is a little sad.
Yep.
And like some places makes me feel like I hope I'm in the bishopric right now. Like I hope as a young man's leader that I do not sell my kids short.
Yeah.
There, you know, like I feel like I would be leaving them with just like at a space of just mediocrity if I left them with that mindset.
I think it just like promotes this idea. It promotes the idea that like sex is not really that important, right? If we don't have bounds on it, if we don't have to seek God's direction on it, then it's not important. Like think of all the things that we say, like, oh, like pray always about all of these things, right? It talks about in Alma, like over your cattle and over your family and over your home and over the weather and your crops and all these things. But if we are not teaching to like also be prayerful and seeking God's view in our sexual lives, then we're kind of saying, that's not really that important. It's just this thing that's always there, but not that important.
Totally. It's crazy how we can convince ourselves of that, you know, when it's like the only commandment that's a covenant in the temple, you know, like this is obviously a big deal, you know, and then like, and in my opinion, and it seems like D&C 49 says this too, that like the purpose of the earth was to get a body, and the purpose of getting a body is so you could be a procreator.
Yeah.
You know, and you could be a co-creator with someone, you know, like this is just, it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Right. We then transfer from this list of questions and you can feel the whole room shift. And I love to like kind of point out to them that like, think about the pieces of revelation you just got. And our listeners, I think, probably had this happen too, where like they heard us ask questions and they went, of course, or of course not, you know? And like, I think even with sexual behaviors, that one happens pretty often. Right. And it's like, look, your spirit is reacting to like what is godly, you know, and you're getting pieces of revelation now. And as you can keep aiming at that God, man, can you find like so much more sexual freedom, happiness, peace, and a release of pressure than you can find any other way.
I love that. Like tuning into and helping clients see that like they are getting information already. They are already, getting that
in my
inspiration.
opinion, you watched, like your spirit watched a sexual relationship between your heavenly parents for millennia.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not unfamiliar to you. Like, I think your spirit is going to resonate with things that you're like, oh yeah, this is what it's supposed to be. I've seen this. And
you have those experiences in your own relationships, right? Like if you have a partner and you're having a sexual relationship, like you have experiences where you're like, no, I don't think so. Or like, that was good and
that was what
godly.
It's meant to be. Yeah, I love that. Coming out of these questions, we ask people to take one to God. And like I'm asking all of our listeners to do this. Okay. Like take a specific question, right? Because you're going to get so much better answers if you have a specific question. Take a specific question to God. And I recommend doing it with a pen.
So that you can like write down.
Totally. Right. And like whether you like kneel and pray and then write down your thoughts after, or if you just write the whole thing as a letter to God, like awesome. Right. But like that putting pen to paper is going to make you kind of think of what is God telling me. Yeah, that's a principle President Nelson has taught. Yeah. I know. Like to record your thoughts. Powerful. Yeah. So powerful to record, right? And so I ask people to at least with a pen write down, I don't know what to write. Ask God a question and at least write down, I don't know what to write. Because as you start writing, I think all of a sudden revelation will come to you and then you will put your words on it. Yep. Right? And you'll write them down and the words may not be perfect, but the message behind the words is from a God. Like I believe that wholeheartedly. That like God is itching to teach you about God-like sexuality because like President Nelson said in his Think Celestial talk, this is the one privilege and power of godliness that you get to experience on this earth. So why would he not answer and speak? He's like revved up to tell you about it. Yeah. You know? Like, man, I hope that, I mean, if it was my kids, I'm like, my daughter was like asking a question about sex and I was like, yes, all right. I get to teach you about this awesome, phenomenal thing that will make you feel more complete, loved, and secure than you will ever feel in your whole life. I love that. Yeah. Like, I'm pumped to teach you about this. And I feel like God is trying to teach us that too. So cool. Yeah. If we get that like experience, like that strengthens our
connection with God.
Totally.
When we like lean into, hey, this is a space that I can talk to him about and
Totally.
her about.
Totally.
And then it also gives us like a place to point our kids, right? With more confidence. I think that like this isn't just about them learning what they need to get to marriage, but that like you are going to go through this process forever. And so always go to God and ask your questions about sex.
I love that. You know, like I'm trying to find ways in my home to support my kids seeking God in all ways, emotionally, sexually, physically, like seek your God, and then everything will kind of fall into place.
Yep,
you know?
Love it. Thanks for joining us for this discussion today. We hope it was valuable for you and your families. Our website, trueconnectionsrecovery.com, has a bunch of resources that you can access to get support from us.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways we're trying to help individuals, right? Whether it's through like individual recovery, like partner support, even like parental support, like how can I set my home up as a place for success?
Yep. We will be putting like technology management resources, other educational tools, or like workshops that might be up and coming in the area.
Just trying to provide ways for like families to feel supported, right? And so all of that you can find there on that website.
The more that this gets shared and like as you talk about it with others that you know, like the discussions kind of flow and we can all grow in this area together.
Yeah, we really succeed as a community.
Yep.
Thank you.